How's it going, guys? Back once again with another Groove Agent video today. Question that I've been asked by a few friends on Facebook recently is which is best out of Addictive Drums 2 and Groove Agent 5. I also got recently asked to do a video on Addictive Drums 2 by one of my subscribers, JW, to go over why I've mentioned a couple of times why I prefer using Addictive Drums 2 over the Acoustic Agent in Groove Agent 5. So today I'm going to do a quick video going over the pros and cons to me of using each. The short answer really out of which is best is having both gives you the best of both worlds. Groove Agent 5 is an incredible drum sampler with a very intuitive workflow within Cubase, with some pretty cool acoustic drum modules rolled in. And Addictive Drums 2 is specifically an acoustic drum module with a much better workflow and interface to create drum breaks from scratch within the software without much need for resampling. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, and let's jump in. Okay, so we're here in Cubase 10. This should be looking pretty familiar now to people who've been watching any of my other videos. I'm not going to go too in-depth into drum processing today. I've got two instances of Groove Agent 5 here to go into processing drums from scratch, as well as going over the benefits of using each of these two in-depth instruments would be an incredibly long video, so that's something for another time. I've got Groove Agent 5 here loaded up with a studio kit with a preset from Funk Essentials, which is one I've used a fair bit in other videos, called Straight Shuffle. And I have another instance of Groove Agent 5 here, which has got some resampling done from the Acoustic Agent, and I'll go over the benefits of doing that shortly. And then an instance of Addictive Drums 2, so we can compare the two workflows. So the first benefit of Addictive Drums 2 is kit piece interchangeability. Now, to touch on that within Groove Agent, all you can actually do within the interface as far as interchanging kit pieces is within each of these kits. With the full version, you do get 3 full drum kits, 4 within Groove Agent 5, including the new one, the kit. You get the kit, you get the vintage kit, the studio kit, and the rock kit. And if you have Cubase, you'll also get the Studio SE kit and the Kit SE, which is just kind of, inferior versions with less options of the regular studio and the kit. So all you can interchange within the full version is two different kick drums, 2 different snares, and that's about it. You can't change out what the snares are in here, for instance, with the snares from the vintage kit or the rock kit, or the kicks, or anything else for that matter. One of the other major differences is that if I touch on the hi-hat here, you're going to see that it doesn't include envelopes or tuning knobs that you get on the kick and snare. So here we've got a tuner and basic envelopes, which are more like a transient shaper than an actual amp envelope, to be honest. I don't find these envelopes as useful as the ones in Addictive Drums 2, which is another reason why Addictive Drums really does shine. But for instance, with a hi-hat, if you're working at drum and bass tempos of around 170, it's quite essential to be able to tighten up the hi-hats like you would with the kick and snare. Otherwise it's going to start getting quite washy and messy in the high end, and this just doesn't give you the ability to do that without resampling, which I'll touch on in a little while when we go over to this version here. One of the other major improvements in Addictive Drums 2 over version 1, and we'll open up Addictive Drums now. I've got a funk kit loaded up from one of the preset libraries I own, the Funk library. It's called Naturally Funky. When I'm working with kits from scratch in Addictive Drums, I tend to try to start with something fairly dry and then work through it from there. So if we go to the edit page, another thing you're going to notice is that, when we're talking about this hi-hat, if we open the kit piece controls here, you're going to see we have a tuner and we also have an envelope. And we can really tighten up the hi-hats with this. Tune them up, tune them down, whatever you want to do. So that's useful, and it's something that you can't do without resampling to a Beat Agent kit within Groove Agent. Same goes for the cymbals. You can't do anything to adjust the envelopes or the tuning of the cymbals within Groove Agent 5, and that does go for the full version as well as the SE version. So that's another reason why this really does stand above the Acoustic Agent when you're working with acoustic drums. And then as far as the kit piece interchangeability options go in here, so say with this kick, if I let this loop play through, I've got the same MIDI playing on all three instruments here. We can just interchange the kick and snare with anything that from any of the AD packs that I own. And I don't have the full library. The ones that I do have are, I think, Funk, one of the Rock kits, the two Fairfax kits. I think I have the Modern Soul and R&B, the Vintage Dry, and I think that might be it. But we can go through and some of the additional kicks and snares that it gives you as solo instruments. So you can really come up with some very different sounding breaks just by being able to interchange these kits. And to do that in Groove Agent, you have to resample to a Beat Agent drum pad from one kit to the other, and it is really long. And you wouldn't have the multi-sampling capability that this has without multi-sampling each of those drums as well. And I have got a video on multi-sampling from different sources on my channel, so check that out if you're more interested in that kind of thing. Another big pro for using Addictive Drums 2 over Groove Agent is you can link drum pads together. So if we go back to the Pearl reference drums here, say this snare wasn't really hitting enough, we could add another one on one of these flexi channels here. So I'm just going to hit the load button here, and we're going to go through, say, other snares. And one that I quite like to layer is this Craviotto custom shop. So we're going to load that. And you can link it by dragging this to this flexi pad, link to the open hit. Now that's going to trigger both. So, you know, that can be quite useful. The only way you can do that directly within the Acoustic Agent in Groove Agent 5 that I know of is with the Simon Phillips Studio drums. It does have kick and snare triggers. I think it has 33 of each. I'll probably be doing a video specifically on Simon Phillips Studio drums at some point because it is quite a cool refill. But that's another video for another day. So I'm just going to go back to that preset that I was using. And moving on, another thing that I really like for this is when you're in the edit page here, say on the kick and snare, instead of in Groove Agent 5, I'm going to move this over here so we can compare the two a little easier. If we go into the mixer here, you do actually have two different close mics in the full version for the kick and snare, and it's in this is all of the groups here, and then this is where your close mics are. So we have an in and out for the kick and a top and bottom for the snare. So if I play that through, you're going to see that in order to change the balance, you've got to mess with two different channels. Whereas in Addictive Drums, it's just much more intuitive. It's a slider to balance the two. So let's have a listen to that now. You're going to hear that the beta gives it much more of a kind of plasticky attack, and the other mic is going to be much more boomy on the kick. And then with the snare drum, you can do the same with the top and bottom mic. You're going to get much more of the kind of snare buzz with the bottom mic than with the top. So yeah, that can be just a massive time saver as opposed to working, you know, navigating through the mixer to these close mics and adjusting levels every time you want to change something like that. Another one that is very huge for me, especially when working with drum and bass, and for this one we will have to go to the sampled one to kind of demonstrate it. I think with the snare drum will probably be the best way to show you. So if we go back to here, I think I'm going to switch to snare A for the purposes of this. And then if we go into here, into this MIDI, I'm just going to close Addictive Drums for a second, open the editor window. You're going to, if we go to the snare channel, every time one of these high velocity main snares is triggered, you're going to notice that there's some round robin going on. Even though they're the same velocity, it's going to be triggering different samples. Now Now that is not ideal if you're trying to create drum and bass drums. You're going to want probably a more cohesive kick and snare, and there's no way to turn off round robin within this itself. So that's another reason why I definitely recommend, I mean, I do think these drum kits sound very good, but I do recommend resampling to a beat agent kit, in another instance a groove agent, choosing the one that you like best and using that as a starting point. Whereas in Addictive Drums 2, and we'll move over to that now, it has this option here. So this is also designed to sound realistic in that it'll have round robin going on by default. So if we play that, just going to move this over here so we can see what we're doing, and we'll have the snare. You can hear that that's triggering round robin as well, but with this option here on the no alts, you can actually turn it off, so it only triggers one sample every time. That can be huge when you're trying to just create breaks quickly in the software itself without really doing any resampling, if you're just trying to export break loops. Like I said, I do still, even with Addictive Drums, I do often tend to resample it to Groove Agent, because Groove Agent just has much better sampling capability and better options for drum layering. I'll be moving on to the benefits of Groove Agent 5 in a minute. Most of them are to do with sampling though, not so much to do with the acoustic agent. You do also have another cool thing here called the Tone Designer, which is really useful for reducing ringing in a snare. You can see it's kind of reducing some of these ringy harmonics, probably around 1K. And in order to do that in an acoustic agent, it would take you ages EQing, trying to pull some of those ringy harmonics down. This slider here and these knobs basically affect how the velocity of your drum hits here affects the volume, the filter, and the sample that's triggered. So if you slide this up, it's going to only really trigger more high velocity ones, and with this it'll be much more sensitive. So yeah, you do have a lot of options. This filter cut can be very good, and I'm not really going to go too in depth on my workflow. I do recommend watching some videos from DLR, did 2 very good ones for Plugin Boutique on how he creates breaks from scratch using Addictive Drums 2. Computer Music Mag have a good one from Break, another good one from Icicle where they're working with this. And I'd also recommend ArtFX's channel. He is a Ableton user predominantly, but he does have quite a lot of content on how he creates drum layers using Addictive Drums 2. And I'm still fairly new to using Addictive Drums 2. It's been quite a recent switch for me from just through the frustrations I have with the acoustic agent, not being able to turn off round robin, not being able to interchange kit pieces. And I think maybe I'll start doing some Addictive Drums 2 content once I've kind of beefed up my library for it. But at the moment, I think I only have about 6 or 7 of the AD packs. So another thing that's quite cool about this is if we just mute that for a sec, if you go to this kind of library browser here, you can hit play on these and it'll kind of show you what the presets sound like. But one thing that is cool is it'll also show you the ones you don't own. So I'll scroll through to one that I don't have here. This one here, actually, my friend Lee, Big Up Quadrant in Seattle, he actually recommended that I pick this one up because the hi-hats in it are very good apparently. And so let's have a listen to something here. And I can see what he means. The hi-hat in this is actually a better starting point than most of the ones that I do have with the AD packs I have. But because of the envelope shaping and the tuning options and everything in here, you can really do quite a lot to change the sound of each drum hit compared to what you can do in the acoustic agent. So it is just a much more versatile instrument for creating more organic but individual sounding kits. And you're going to see just from this one progressive rock kit just how different some of these sound. And I don't think you could even get anywhere close to the level of variety from one kit in the Acoustic Agent that you can within here. It's just not possible. I've tried, and that is why in the end I succumbed and bought Addictive Drums too, because it is just much better at the job when you're working with acoustic drum layers. So that's kind of handy. You can go through and preview ones you don't own, see which ones you might be interested in picking up, whereas with the Acoustic Agent refills, you're limited to just a few very short kind of sound bites on the Steinberg website to kind of show you what's included. And you know, this is just much better at creating drum loops within the software directly. That's another plus, because you don't necessarily have to resample to get one uniform kick and snare. You don't have to resample the hi-hats and cymbals in order to envelope shape them and tune them. So you can get a much better starting point and just export a loop. I do tend to prefer to resample each drum hit so that I don't have hi-hats layered over my kicks or snares when I'm chopping them up, things like that. I'm just a bit anal retentive about that kind of stuff. So moving on, this can actually be resampled much easier than, for instance, any other third-party plugin. Within Groove Agent, if we go to this sampled version, the resampled version now that I did, it does in the version 5, in the full version, have this recorder tab where you can record, and I showed in a video I did about a week ago how I resampled some 808 drum hits from D16 Group's Nephaton 808 plugin, and layering them up with some acoustic drum hits from the Acoustic Agent SE. If you want to check that video out, I'll put a link to it in the description of this one. But with the Addictive Drums 2 interface, you can just, even with these ones you don't own, so for instance, let's find one where it has a clean hi-hat. I think that would be a good option. So we could take that. You would have to set up a group channel. So I'm going to add a group channel to the selected channel here. Just call it Record Out. And then I'm going to add an audio track, which I'm going to call Record In. Add the track there. I'm going to make sure that that is coming from the Record Out bus. And then if we hit record here, just going to turn off loop for the process of doing this. I'm going to hit record and then hit preview. Okay, so then we could go in here, chop this up, do whatever you want with it. Let's turn loop back on real quick. Let's just mute that. So say you wanted to, you know, sample those hi-hats, you could just take those, you know, drop it straight onto a drum pad here, find the sample that you want, and use that. So, you know, you can actually sample from AD packs that you don't own using Cubase, which is quite nice. And then the UI is another big one for me. So if we go to the edit page here versus the Acoustic Agent, you're going to see that, you know, if you want control over the kick and snare envelopes in the Acoustic Agent, you have to be on this page. If you want to go into the mixer, you have to be in this page. You've got a whole tab for the groups, the room and the overheads and the master output. But if you want to go into the close mics, you're constantly navigating between all of these tabs in the mixer. And you're quite limited in what you can do with the effects in here as well. Whereas in Addictive Drums 2, if we go back now to Naturally Funky, I'm going to get rid of this channel and get rid of this channel as well. And I'm just going to move the MIDI back over here and we'll let that play. You're going to see that you've got everything at your fingertips here. So you've got all of the kit piece controls, pitching. You also have a pitch envelope, which you can't do any of that with the Acoustic Agent without resampling to a Beat Agent kit. You've got full envelope shaping. You've got quite a good variety of effects here. This is pretty much the similar kind of effects to what you have in the macro here. And then you've got the entire mixer all at your fingertips here. You've got your send effects just on that one button. you know, and each of these buttons has its own insert effect rack. So it's much more intuitive to work with. I think I much prefer it to the interface for the Acoustic Agent. So let's have a look at what you can do with this. So for instance, you know, not only can you just go in here and, you know, change snare drums with one button, you've got access to how much you're sending to room and overhead mics, but you can also change the width, the panning of what's being sent to the room and overhead mics, which is really nice. You've got your snare bleed here. You've got the slider for the close mic mixing. The EQ is actually better than the EQ in here as well. So if we take a look at that now, this EQ just has a low shelf, a high shelf, and 2 bell filters for boosting or cutting, whereas this one has a low pass, a high pass, and 4 different bell filters, which are, you know, it's much more versatile EQ. You've got much better envelope here, a pitch envelope. So if, you know, if for instance, let's let this play through and I'll kind of show you some of the stuff you can do here. I'm going to go back to the basic preset that we were using, and we'll use that as a starting point. So generally I would turn off the snare buzz. I generally don't like that too much. I'll put on no alternating samples on my snare and also on my kick, so that we've got a uniform kick and snare drum. And then, you know, you can adjust maybe the width of what's going to the room mic from the kick here. Let's bring that down a little bit. Keep things a bit more mono in the low end. You could then start messing with the mix of the close mic. The compressor in Addictive Drums looks very simple, but it is actually quite good. I quite like to use it. Whereas, you know, the compressor in here is basically the vintage compressor. I think it's supposed to be an 1176 emulation essentially, which is the same one as in the Cubase channel strip, but I don't tend to use it that much. I'll use my third-party plugins. So all in all, that's why I like to use this for a starting point for creating drums. We can go into a snare here, tighten up the envelope a bit. And yeah, let's maybe mess with the bottom and top mic mixing here. Maybe send a little less width to the overhead mic. Maybe even turn the overhead down a bit so we get a bit more hi-hat and cymbal through the overhead. You've also got this high and low cut filter here, which can be nice for focusing the energy into a certain frequency area. So yeah, it's just so much nicer to work with having everything on one screen here. You can also, like you can with Groove Agent, you can drag MIDI from the MIDI libraries that you have. So say we go into funk beats here, we could drag like one of these variations, maybe 16th hi-hat with ghost notes. We can just drag that up to here. And, you know, if we loop that instead, you know, it's a very similar workflow. So that's one thing that I like. Another thing is that it can be much more easily resampled so when I do come to resampling single hits from this into Groove Agent, and I'll demonstrate that now. If we open up the one that I've done a bit of sampling from the other kit here. If we go back to the kit here, it's going to depend on the velocity, much like when you trigger these drum pads. The velocity depends on how high up the pad that you hit it, and it's the same here. So it's going to depend. You can find an area that you like, somewhere around there, and it'll record it to here. Now there is a bit of a glitch, or it's not so much a bug, but it saves it to a temporary folder. So the best way to go about it is drag it to your pool. We'll put it in there, and it'll give it an individual name that way. So then we can do the same with the snare. We'll drag that up to the pool. And you know, we could then drag those onto a beat agent kit here without having to use the recorder tab at all. So, you know, it can be quite handy that way, using this audio recorder to resample things very quickly. Now I'm going to go over some of the benefits of Groove Agent over Addictive Drums, and as far as the Acoustic Agent goes, there aren't that many. It does have a much better workflow with Cubase, and it has options here where you can adjust how much RAM it uses, how hungry it is on CPU, and I find it does have a bit of a lighter CPU load than using Addictive Drums too, especially when you've got a lot of effects running on every single kit piece. So that is one of the benefits of using this thing. The sampling is just phenomenal on this, and Addictive Drums 2 isn't a drum sampler, it's a drum rompler. So that's obviously a benefit here. And to go into that, so this is basically some of the kit pieces from this same kit here, the straight shuffle preset that I resampled onto a beat agent kit. So we've got the kick drum, the snare. I think I used snare one. Yeah. And using the amp envelope, then you see you've got, once you've resampled it, you've got much more Addictive Drums like control. And another thing about these envelopes in the Acoustic Agent is it doesn't give you any feedback as to where you are on milliseconds. So you don't know how many milliseconds of delay you have. You don't know how many milliseconds of attack or any of that, which can be quite essential really, especially when working at higher tempos. And again, you can't even adjust the envelopes on the hi-hats or the cymbals. It only affects toms, kicks and snares. That's the only kit pieces that have envelopes at all. Another benefit of using Groove Agent over Addictive Drums 2 is the paid refills. Even that, not just these ones here that are just basically pattern libraries and mixer presets, but all of the ones that include new samples or new acoustic kits. They're quite a bit cheaper than the AD packs for Addictive Drums 2. So I think you're looking at about, if you pay full price per AD pack, I bought a package of Addictive Drums 2 that came with a choice of, I think it was 6 AD packs. But if you buy them individually, I think they're about $80, versus about $40-50 for a refill for Groove Agent 5. So that is another benefit there. Another good benefit of Groove Agent is that you can just create drum map directly from the instrument, whereas with Addictive Drums 2 you can't. I have one that I created, and it was quite a long process. I had to go into drum map setup here and name it all based on, if we just open up Addictive Drums here, if you go into here you can show the key map. So I basically had to go through and name it by key and create one and save it. I can upload one to a file sharing website if anyone's interested in having my Addictive Drums 2 drum map, because it does then allow you to create drum maps and go in and edit things that way, which can be pretty handy. Another one is the export mixer and effects to Cubase feature. So if you've got a kit that's sounding kind of nice that you like within Groove Agent, you can just right click on it here and it'll export all of your mixer settings, all of your effect settings to the Cubase mix console immediately with one click. Whereas with Addictive Drums 2, you would still be confined to creating separate outputs here, activating the outputs within Cubase here, and all of that. So it's a longer process to do that with Addictive Drums 2, but again, I don't really tend to work with it that way. I tend to get something sounding how I want within Addictive Drums 2, then resample it drum by drum to drum pads in here, and then I'll start layering it with other drum hits. And the benefit of doing that, so I mean, you can actually layer, for instance, I think there are some electronic sounding snares here. It might be in extras. If we go through here, Yeah, you've got like some percussion things here that you could add in, like drum triggers, things like that. I think there might even be, yeah, triggers. So you've got, you know, kick triggers here, some snare triggers, white noise, short, long. So we could, you know, maybe load up some white noise here, link that to our snare. See how that sounds. Now, obviously, you'd want to go in and edit the envelope on that. So we'll tighten up that envelope a lot. And then see how that sounds. So then if we go back to our snare, just adds a lot more high end like that. So you can do that, and you can do that in Simon Phillips Studio drums. But the only way to layer multiple samples together within Groove Agent 5 is to do it within a Beat Agent kit like I do with these ones. So, you know, I've only got one sample per pad here, but I do have other videos where I show the process of resampling. So say we wanted that noise there, we could go to the Flexi 2 channel, drag that up to our pool, and then I'm going to drag that onto the snare pad. Using the plus, we'll add it. So now we have two different samples here. This is our noise layer and our regular layer. If we select this, we can solo them. I'm just going to go to the main pad here and set them to layer. And, you know, we could go in and adjust the envelope even more there. So let's put this on one shot, sync it, get it kind of similar to how I did the other one. Bring the sustain probably way down. Let's, yeah, snap it to the grid. I'm going to bring the sustain level down to like, I don't know, maybe 30. Turn off solo. So you can do that, and then you can also go in and check the phase relationship between drums very easily once you're layering drums on one drum pad within here. So that's another benefit of using Groove Agent, is its sampling capability is just amazing. It is definitely my workhorse drum sampler, and I do pretty much all of my drums in Groove Agent now, even if I'm sampling from another source like Addictive Drums. I used to do everything in audio, but I just love the added element of control, and especially since they've added some of these new features to version 5, like showing the waveform in the background here. So say we make that bigger, you know, we can go right to the beginning there and start kind of, if we zoom right in here, go right to the very beginning, we can start, you know, checking the phase relationship between samples and things like that, which can be quite important. And then another thing is you do get within the Beat Agent, not so much within the Acoustic Agent, but you do get a much better variety of effects. Within here, you've got the effects on each of these kit pieces. So if we go to the snare, for instance, we can turn on the inserts, and you've got, you know, you've got a compressor and distortion module, an EQ, a tape, and a transient designer basically, plus these elements here. But as far as other effects goes, you've just got this one, it's like a hybrid delay and reverb, which you can kind of blend and stuff, and you get, you know, a plate setting, ambience, room, and hall, and that's basically it. Within here though, you've got, you know, multiple reverbs, delay, different types of filters, different distortions, you've got mod effects here, you know, lots of different dynamic effects, spatial panner effects, things like that. So it does have a greater variety of effects once you've got things resampled to a Beat Agent kit. But again, you do really have to resample it to get the full benefit out of Groove Agent. So I hope that cleared up some stuff there. They are both incredibly good instruments. I love Addictive Drums too. I haven't fully got my head around it yet. I'm still kind of working my way through adopting it as my primary acoustic drum module from the Acoustic Agent. But already I can see the benefits in my workflow. It's much quicker to get a good starting point for an acoustic drum layer, so start layering up with some more electronic kicks and snares. And yeah, I'm going to be plodding on with it and probably start switching over to doing a little bit of Addictive Drums content as well as Groove Agent, doing some resampling from both sources, maybe with some other, you know, 808 and 909 hits from Neferton and Drummers on, which are great emulations from D16. And that'll be kind of where I'll be going with things when we start doing drum and bass drums from the ground up. So yeah, one is a sampler with some basic capability for acoustic drums, and the other one is purely an acoustic drum module, which does have some electronic drum hits on the trigger section that you can layer up, but has no sampling capability whatsoever. So yeah, once again, please do like and subscribe if this was helpful to you in any way, and I'll see you next time. Peace out, guys.